Hello, it's Regina. Welcome back to my haunted library. Lily says hi. Today I'm doing a review of the book Pet Sematary by Stephen King and talking about the two films, the one that just came out and then the original one back in 1988, I believe. And just talking about kind of like a fiction into film type of discussion. So I'm going to put Lily down. I've been hugging her very tightly lately because this book really got under my skin. And this is a second time I've read Pet Sematary. I read it a long time ago, like when it came out. So I just finished the book yesterday, and I was struck by how good it is. I think this is one of Stephen King's best books, and certainly one of his most accessible in that it's not super long like some of his books are, and it's very plot-driven. So if you're looking for a good entry point into Stephen King's work, I would highly recommend Pet Sematary over Salem's Lot or even like The Shining, because to me this is just very plot driven. Now he acknowledges towards the end of the book that he did basically take the plot from the short story The Monkey's Paw, and he has an excerpt from that story kind of acknowledging that. And I think that part of what makes the film adaptations not quite great, which I'll talk about in a minute, is that it's really about the plot, when the book is so much more about like a meditation on death and grief and loss, and it's really good. In fact, reading it this time, I was just struck by how really gothic this book is. I think it's the most gothic of all of King's works that I've read, even beyond like Salem's Lot. Like I feel like this one really deals with a lot of heaviness and sadness, and that is all in the kind of inner monologue of the main protagonist, Lewis, and to some extent the wife, but and her name is Rachel. I just read this, how can I forget? But that is hard to put onto film, the inner thoughts of someone. So you either do it in like flashbacks, which the first film and the second film do kind of like with varying degrees of success. So to the book, I feel like the book is just great. And this is going to have spoilers, so if you don't know what happens, click off now. But or stick around if you want to learn. But it's about a couple with two young children, and it's, again, a family story. And I've seen this theme in King's work, and certainly The Shining, which I just read recently, reread, the idea of the vulnerability of the family through the male, the husband's point of view, which I think is very interesting. He's a doctor. They're kind of getting out of the hustle bustle of the city and moving to a small town, Bangor. Is that how you say it? Maine. And there's this kind of idyllic sense of going into the country, but then there's this horrible, horrible presence of a road where these 18-wheel trucks go whizzing by. And that just caused a lot of anxiety. And it's brilliant storytelling in that way, because you just know something bad is going to happen. There's a lot of foreshadowing. The first church, the kitty cat gets killed, and then Lewis and Judd, the elderly man next door, bury the cat in the pet cemetery, the old Indian burial ground. So we have an old Indian burial ground theme. And, of course, Church comes back, but he is not the same sweet pet he once was. And then when little Gage, the toddler, suffers the same fate and gets killed by the truck, Lewis loses his mind and buries his child in the pet cemetery. And then Gage comes back, and he has changed, and he murders everyone in sight, basically. And then Lewis returns to the pet cemetery with his wife Rachel, and the end of the book is her kind of coming back like a zombie, and she's like, "Darling," he feels the hand. I mean, it is really, really great. It's scary. It's this book has a lot of depth. It really takes you on an emotional journey, and I think that is one thing that is very successful about Stephen King's work is he gets into these like deep characterizations of these people who are flawed but and haunted. You know, this is where it gets into like the Gothic themes. Rachel is haunted by her sister Zelda, and I actually think that the second movie really did a great job with the Zelda section. I loved Zelda in the first movie too, very scary. The first movie is very true to the book in that it basically follows the same story. The actor who plays Lewis is a good-looking guy, but he seems very, like I just watched the first film again last night. He just feels very wooden, you know, and doesn't really sell the Lewis character, although it's really hard because how do you show what someone is thinking? In the second film, the new one, I think the Lewis character is a better actor, but again, he's just kind of walking around like with a scowl, looking like he's suffering all the time, but it's really hard to articulate why that is. But let's talk about the first film. So the first film, it's funny because I went to see the first film by myself in a really scary, talk about Gothic, like a really scary old movie theater in Times Square. This was when it came out in the late 80s. And I was living in New York at the time. I lived a few blocks from Times Square. And at that time, Times Square was not the like Disney-fied place it is now. It was a scary place. And most of the theaters on 42nd Street were porn houses. They were old vaudeville theaters, so they still had that kind of Gothic, which I loved, facades of like little spires and almost like gargoyle kind of feeling. That was like movie palaces from the 1920s and 30s, and they were kind of that crumbling edifices, but some of them still played movies. And I remember I really wanted to go see it as soon as it came out because someone who I went to college with in theater school is in the first movie. It's his name's Brad Greenquist, and he plays Victor Pascal the Ghost. He was a few years older than me in my acting program. Like he was a senior when I was a freshman. And I wasn't really friends with him, but I knew him. And that was his like first big break when he got that film role. So it's like I really wanted to go see it. And he's very good in it. And he's gone on to do some other things and you know have a career. But I remember we were all very excited and quite a bit envious when he got that role. But especially because his pictures on the poster and it was all over the place. So I really wanted to go see it, but my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, did not want to go because he doesn't like horror movies. So I was really mad. I went out by myself to watch it in Times Square, which is a place that I wouldn't go by myself at that time especially at night. So the movie scared me to death. And this was during the time where people were, you know, people in movie theaters, like I could still smoke cigarettes in the movie theater and people would be smoking. And I remember when Gage shows up in his little, almost like his little outfit with the hat and the cane, like he's almost doing like a little Charlie Chaplin thing. A woman behind me started like crying like this horrific moan came out of her. Like, I was terrified. And I remember walking home from that feeling like, you know, I was jumping out of my skin. So that was a good horror experience, actually. But so I hadn't watched the old movie since then, and I rewatched it. And I think the old movie gets a lot of things right that the new movie doesn't. Well, first of all, the new movie definitely earns points as far as like the atmosphere. Production design has just come a really long way since that time, and the Mary Lambert film, the original film, has sort of like a low budget feel. Like when they visit the pet cemetery, it's like a sunny day. It doesn't quite have that scary, misty, ominous feeling like they do in in the new film. But where the new film I think really goes wrong is having Ellie come back instead of Gage. Now I don't know why that decision was made, but I just feel like it was just the wrong decision. I was Lily snoring. I was along. Sorry to bore you. I was along for the ride for the new Pet Sematary, like all the way in. I was really loving it until Gage wasn't the one killed. It was Ellie, and this little girl. And she was a good actress, but so much of this is dependent on her to kind of pull off. And honestly, I was laughing, and that's not good. I was laughing. It ceased to be scary at that point. And when I watched the old one, I was still scared at Gage. First of all, I forgot how like truly amazing this kid is. I don't know how they got him to do what he does, but when he does it, he's got the little scalpel, and he's almost like the like Chucky or the evil voodoo doll in Trilogy of Terror. Like he's running around with it. There's something about like a little kid, something small, hiding under the bed, and we got the old Achilles tendon. They did that in the new movie too, and I did scream at that point and close my eyes. But it seemed like the cat in the old movie was a better actor, Church. The little girl in the original one I thought was really good. So, yeah, both movies are decent. The book is excellent. So I just don't, it's hard to, King's work doesn't really translate that well to film, I've decided. And I think that maybe the reason why they keep going after some of the ones like the ones that have more of a solid plot is because it has a solid plot. I mean, in some ways, the plot is very, like I said, it's the monkey's paw. It's been done. It's kind of a gimmick. And once you know that, it kind of loses its strength. So what else do you have? Well, you have these meditations on death and loss and fear and sadness that is part of this family, and the madness that comes from losing a child. So, and also the whole Zelda thing. And in the second movie, that was really well done. I thought the dumbwaiter thing, the jump scares and all that stuff was great. Anyway, that's my thoughts for Pet Sematary, the book and the movies. Let me know below if you have seen them, read this, what you think of the adaptations. And I will see you soon in my haunted library. Bye.